Welcome to Dreamy Old Stories. Here we tell slow and gentle tales from history. Stories that calm your mind and help you fall asleep. If you enjoy the journey, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin tonight's dreamy story. Hey guys, tonight we're slowing down the clock. So, dim the lights, find a comfortable spot, and let's drift back, way back, to a time when people built things, not for Instagram, but for gods, ghosts, and the occasional power-hungry pharaoh who thought eternity needed a personal brand. You've seen these objects in museums, the cracked statues, the golden masks, the pots missing a handle. They sit under glass, labeled neatly by curators who pretend they know exactly what they were for. But most of the time, no one really knows. What we do have are stories. Some are carved in stone, others just whispered through centuries of guesswork. And that's what we'll explore tonight, the quiet, odd, and sometimes petty human stories buried under all that dust and divine symbolism. Let's start somewhere obvious, Egypt. Because of course, the Mask of Tutankhamun is one of those objects that practically glows with mystery and museum lighting. The smooth gold, the blue stripes, the smug little half-smile of a teenage king who didn't live long enough to use most of the furniture buried with him. Tutankhamun became pharaoh around age 9, which sounds exciting until you realize that at 9, most kids can barely manage their homework, let alone rule an empire obsessed with pleasing the gods. He died around 18 or 19, possibly from an infected leg, malaria, or just bad luck mixed with royal inbreeding. Egypt's version of a high school dropout story, except it ended in a tomb filled with treasure. The famous mask wasn't even made for him, probably. It might have been recycled from a previous burial, one of his stepmothers. Maybe because the name on the mask was altered. The Egyptians were thrifty that way. Death didn't stop a little regifting. When British archaeologist Howard Carter opened the tomb in 1922, he must have felt like he had cracked open history itself. But behind all the glory, the dig had that awkward colonial flavor. A group of British men raiding a dead teenager's bedroom and taking notes like, yes, quite splendid. They were careful enough, but let's be honest, it was looting with paperwork. And then came the famous curse. You know, the idea that everyone who entered Tut's tomb started dying mysteriously. The truth, most of them lived long, boring lives. But that didn't stop newspapers from printing every sniffle and stubbed toe as proof of ancient vengeance. The curse sold papers and museum tickets. If anything, the only real curse was the mummy itself, traveling the world like a celebrity on tours, under bright lights and humidity that ancient linen was never designed for. But Tut's mask remains the face of Egyptology. The glittering symbol of a boy who became immortal through accident and PR. Let's float over to Greece for something a little moodier. The Antikythera mechanism found by sponge divers in 1901. Off a Greek island, it looked like a pile of rusted bronze and broken gears. For decades, no one paid much attention. It sat in storage, quietly oxidizing, until someone realized that the corroded lump had teeth, gear teeth. It turned out to be an ancient analog computer from around 100 BCE, used to predict eclipses and planetary movements. Basically, a pocket universe before pocket calculators existed. The weird part, it was so complex that nothing like it appeared again for 1,000 years. The Greeks built one insanely sophisticated gadget, dropped it in the sea. And then everyone just collectively forgot how to do that. Typical human behavior, really. The ship that carried it probably sank in a storm, loaded with art, wine, and wealthy passengers. Imagine the panic, the shouting, the sound of amphorae smashing against the deck as waves crashed over them. Somewhere, in that chaos, this little mechanical brain sank quietly to the ocean floor and waited. 2,000 years to remind us that ancient people weren't dumb. They were just as curious, clever, and occasionally overconfident as we are now. Museums like to call the mechanism ahead of its time, but that's just code for we still don't understand how they pulled this off. Scholars still debate who built it. Maybe it was inspired by Archimedes, or by someone working for a rich patron who wanted a toy that could impress his dinner guests. Because, honestly, even back then, showing off was half the point of being rich. Next, let's wander east. China, roughly the 3rd century BC. The terracotta army, you've seen the pictures. Rows of grey soldiers staring into eternity, each with a slightly different face, like a massive army of clay clones. They guard the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, a man so obsessed with immortality that he basically micromanaged his own afterlife. He unified China through war, built the first version of the Great Wall, and ruled with all the charm of a spreadsheet, but he was terrified of death. He sent expeditions looking for the elixir of life, which, ironically, may have poisoned him. Mercury pills, probably not the best idea. So, instead of finding immortality, he built it. His tomb complex was a vast underground city, palaces, stables, rivers of mercury, and thousands of clay soldiers standing guard forever. They weren't just statues. Each one was crafted with individual details, hair, armor, expressions. Imagine the labor. Craftsmen spent decades making sure no two soldiers looked identical, even though no one was ever supposed to see them again. That's dedication, or fear of getting executed for slacking off. When modern farmers discovered the site in 1974, they thought they'd hit pottery, not history. Now, it's one of the most haunting archaeological finds ever. The emperor himself still lies untouched, sealed under layers of earth and toxic mercury vapors. Scientists hesitate to open it, partly for preservation, partly because, well, maybe let the guy rest. He's been waiting long enough. Let's drift west again. This time to the chilly British Isles, where Stonehenge stands in perpetual confusion. Everyone loves to argue about it. Aliens, druids, or prehistoric architects with too much time on their hands. Built roughly 4,000 years ago, Stonehenge isn't a single monument. It's a patchwork of rebuilds, alignments, and upgrades. Think of it like ancient renovation work that never quite finished. We still don't know why it was built. Maybe for astronomy. Maybe funerals. Maybe it was just a big, look what we can do statement. The real mystery is how they moved those stones, some weighing up to 25 tons from miles away. People love to imagine mystical power, but honestly, it was probably just brute labor, ropes, sledges, and way too much community spirit. There's something humbling about that, though. They didn't have steel tools or wheels, but they had purpose. They stood in open fields, dragging rocks across muddy plains, aligning them with stars they barely understood. And then they left, without explaining anything. Typical ancient behavior: build something astonishing, then ghost us for eternity. Now, since we're already in the British Isles, let's stay a bit longer, because the British love collecting artifacts almost as much as they love tea. Enter the Elgin marbles. These were once part of the Parthenon in Athens, sculptures depicting gods, battles, and general Greek perfection. In the early 1800s, Lord Elgin, a British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, decided to save them from neglect, which, in translation, meant take them home. He had them pried off the Parthenon and shipped to London, piece by piece. Today, they sit in the British Museum, polished and serene, while Greece politely keeps asking for them back. It's been 2 centuries of awkward diplomatic small talk. Britain insists they're being preserved. Greece insists that's colonial nonsense. Meanwhile, the statues just sit there, probably wishing humans would stop arguing and dust them properly. It's one of those weird historical situations where everyone thinks they're the hero. Elgin thought he was saving art. The Greeks think he was looting it. And the truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in the middle, where good intentions and arrogance tend to hold hands. Let's glide south now, to the sands of Iraq, ancient Mesopotamia, where writing, cities, and bureaucracy were invented, proving humanity's long commitment to paperwork. Among the most famous artifacts from this region is the Cyrus cylinder. It's a small, barrel-shaped clay object inscribed with Akkadian cuneiform, sometimes called the world's first declaration of human rights, which sounds noble until you realize it was basically a royal press release. King Cyrus the Great had just conquered Babylon around 539 BCE to win hearts and minds. He announced that the gods supported his rule, that he was restoring order, freeing people, rebuilding temples, all very flattering to himself. Modern historians like to call it progressive, but really, it was ancient PR spin. Still, the tone was milder than most conquerors. Cyrus was, by ancient standards, unusually humane. The cylinder ended up buried for centuries before being rediscovered in the 1800s, just in time for British archaeologists to claim it symbolized Western values, which is amusing since Cyrus was Persian. But people love rewriting history to make themselves look good. It's practically a global tradition. Now, for something smaller but weirder. The Venus of Willendorf, that tiny limestone figurine from prehistoric Austria, about 30,000 years old and only 4 inches tall. You've seen her, round body, no face, just curves and texture. She's been called a fertility idol, a goddess, a self-portrait, or just someone's artistic experiment after a long winter in a cave. We'll never really know. What we do know is that she survived tens of thousands of years by pure accident. It's oddly comforting, isn't it? Out of all the grand temples and powerful empires that collapsed, this little figurine, small enough to fit in a pocket, quietly endured. She's one of humanity's earliest attempts to understand itself, to shape beauty, or motherhood, or power into stone. And she's still here, while her maker's entire world has vanished. Speaking of vanishing worlds, let's glide toward the island of Crete, where the Minoans built their labyrinthine palaces long before classical Greece, their most famous artifact. The Phaistos disc, a circular clay disc stamped with mysterious symbols arranged in a spiral. Discovered in 1908, it's still undeciphered. Scholars have tried every trick, linguistics, math, wild guessing, but no one can read it. It might be a prayer, a calendar, a board game, or a grocery list. Its mystery keeps it famous, but also slightly ridiculous. Every few years, someone announces they've cracked the code, only for experts to shrug it off. The truth is, we may never know. The Minoans disappeared, their language lost, leaving behind this single disc that taunts archaeologists like a puzzle missing most of its pieces. It's funny how that works. We imagine the ancient world as noble and serious, but so much of it was trial and error, people scribbling, experimenting, building, and hoping something lasted. The Phaistos disc feels like a message from someone who expected a reply and never got one. Let's pause for a breath. You're probably imagining all these artifacts sitting quietly in their glass cases now, each with its neat little museum label and soft lighting. But remember, they weren't made to be admired. They were made to be used. Worn, touched, prayed to, buried. They held meaning that no exhibit can reproduce. Behind every artifact is a person, someone tired, hopeful, or afraid of death. Someone carving their faith or vanity into stone. That's what makes these objects oddly human. And since we're already in that reflective mood, let's drift toward one more relic before we wrap this section. The Rosetta Stone. If history had a decoder ring, this was it. Discovered in 1799 by French soldiers near Rosetta, Egypt, it had the same text written in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic. It became the key to unlocking Egypt's forgotten language. Before that, hieroglyphs were just mysterious bird-snake eye symbols that no one could read. Then, thanks to the stone, a French scholar named Champollion cracked the code in 1822. He didn't just translate words, he resurrected an entire civilization's voice. And yet, like many great discoveries, it came with irony. The Rosetta Stone itself is still in the British Museum, not Egypt. Napoleon's soldiers found it, the British seized it, and it's been there ever since. It's a symbol of understanding, trapped in a debate over ownership. But maybe that's fitting. Human history is rarely neat or fair. The same stone that unlocked ancient knowledge also reminds us how modern nations still fight over the past. If you've ever been in a museum late in the evening, there's this strange quiet that settles in. The kind of silence that feels almost too heavy for the air. You can practically sense all those artifacts around you, staring, unblinking, as if they're quietly judging everyone who walked past and mispronounced their names. That's the mood. I imagine in the British Museum's Assyrian Gallery, those massive carved panels showing winged bulls and bearded kings. Everyone calls them Lamassu. They guarded the gates of Assyrian palaces almost 3,000 years ago. Now, you might think of them as decorative, but they were basically the ancient version of home security. Each one was a composite of strength: a lion's body, eagle's wings, and a man's face, because apparently one head wasn't terrifying enough. They were meant to keep out evil spirits and nosy neighbors. The funny part, these sculptures weighed tens of tons, but the Assyrians installed them with eerie precision. No cranes, no forklifts, just ramps, manpower, and what must have been a lot of yelling. They carved them from solid stone, dragged them miles across desert, then embedded them into palace walls. You have to admire that kind of effort, all to make sure demons didn't drop by uninvited. When archaeologists found them in the 1800s, they were blown away. And of course, they took them apart and shipped them to London. Because why not relocate ancient monsters halfway across the world? If you visit today, those colossal guardians stand under soft lighting, silent as ever. The irony is, they were built to protect their homeland. And now they guard a gift shop. Let's drift south again, toward the shimmering deserts of Persia. Modern Iran, the Persepolis reliefs are some of the most graceful carvings ever made. They show processions of people bringing tribute to the Persian king, fabrics, animals, gold, and everything you could possibly bribe an empire with. Each figure looks strangely calm, almost meditative, even while carrying enormous gifts up the stairs to the royal audience hall. That was the Persian style. dignity in servitude, harmony in hierarchy, no chaos, no blood, just endless queues of loyal subjects frozen in stone. And yet, Persepolis didn't last. Alexander the Great came along, but mired it for about 5 minutes, then burned it to the ground in a drunken fit of revenge. It's one of those classic bad decisions in history moments, the kind where even his own generals probably sighed and said, "Really, Alex?" What survived were fragments, stone stairs, winged creatures, half-erased faces, and still you can feel the pride behind them. The artists carved not fear, but order, a kind of beauty that said, "We've figured out civilization, and we're not letting go." Now, let's wander into something smaller and much more fragile. The world of ancient jewelry in museums. Jewelry cases are usually the quietest corners. Tiny gold spirals, beads, the kind of stuff that doesn't shout for attention, but tells you exactly what mattered to people: protection, beauty, and luck. One of the strangest collections comes from the royal tombs of yore in Mesopotamia. About 4,500 years old, buried with the Sumerian elite, archaeologists found queens laid out in gold, surrounded by attendants who had apparently taken poison to join them in the afterlife. So yes, fashion, but make it fatal. Queen Pobby's tomb is the most famous. She wore a massive headdress of gold leaves and lapis lazuli beads, like a portable garden made of precious stones. Her jewelry was so elaborate it looked almost impossible to wear. But she wasn't alone. Around her were dozens of servants, musicians, even oxen, all buried together, waiting to serve her in the next world, the chilling part. The tomb was perfectly arranged, everyone positioned neatly, instruments still near their hands. It wasn't chaos, it was ceremony. That calmness makes it more unsettling. It wasn't murder. It was devotion, performed with absolute obedience. And so Queen Pobby still rests in style, her gold headdress gleaming in museum glass, while her story reminds us that ancient luxury usually came with a body count. Let's float west again, across the Mediterranean, into the world of Etruscan tombs, the mysterious people of Italy who lived before Rome took over. The Etruscans loved the afterlife. They treated it like a never-ending dinner party. Their tombs were painted with scenes of dancers, musicians, and banquets. Men and women reclined together, scandalous by later Roman standards, sipping wine, playing games, and pretending death was just another social occasion. One of the most touching artifacts from that culture is the sarcophagus of the spouses. A terracotta coffin showing a man and woman lying side by side, smiling faintly. He's holding his arm round her. She's reaching toward him, both alive in gesture, even as they guard their ashes. It's over 2,500 years old, but somehow it feels modern, warm, human, and weirdly affectionate. Most ancient art feels distant. This one doesn't. It's soft. It says, we lived, we loved, and we're fine with sharing a tomb. That's oddly comforting. Now, you can't talk about ancient artifacts without bumping into Rome. Rome collected more stuff than any empire before it. Statues, coins, mosaics, and gods they borrowed from everywhere else. One of the most curious Roman relics is the Lycurgus cup, a 4th century glass vessel that changes color depending on the light. In daylight, it looks green. When lit from inside, it glows blood red. For centuries, no one knew how it worked. Turns out, the Romans had accidentally invented nanotechnology. They mixed tiny particles of gold and silver into the glass, creating optical effects that modern scientists only understood in the 20th century. So yes, the ancient world had mood cups before we had color-changing mugs. The cup itself shows a myth. King Lycurgus entangled in vines as punishment from the gods. It's gruesome, but beautifully made. Scholars think it was used for special banquets, where someone probably showed it off like, "Check out my magic wine glass." Imagine the flex, and then, like everything else, it ended up buried, forgotten, and eventually rediscovered by people who couldn't believe how advanced it was. Another reminder that innovation has never been linear, just cyclical, with long naps in between. Let's stay with Rome for a moment, because the Romans were masters of showing off in stone. Take the Arapaces, the altar of peace built for Emperor Augustus around 9 BCE. It's one of those monuments that manages to be both beautiful and politically smug. The reliefs show the emperor's family, priests, and symbols of abundance. Fruits, flowers, gentle breezes frozen in marble. It was basically propaganda with good lighting. The idea was, look at us. Rome is calm, the empire prospers, the gods approve. Never mind that the peace came after decades of civil war. The altar didn't celebrate peace so much as winning. Still, the craftsmanship is exquisite. You can almost hear the soft rustle of togas, the murmured prayers, the careful chisel marks of artists paid to flatter their emperor. History loves to call Augustus wise, but really, he was just the first Roman who understood that image control is everything. Let's step back in time again, way back to Neolithic Europe, where stone tools and strange figurines ruled. One of the most puzzling finds from this era is the Thinker of Cernavod, a small clay figure from Romania, around 5000 BC. It shows a man sitting with his head in his hands, clearly deep in thought, or maybe just regretting something. Next to him, in the same burial site, was a female figure, often called the seated woman. They're like the world's oldest couple having an existential crisis. The fact that prehistoric people made something so expressive is striking. Most art from that time is abstract, but this feels like someone caught mid-thought, quietly overwhelmed by being human. We don't know what it meant. Maybe a fertility symbol, maybe a philosophical pose. But it's nice to imagine that even back then, people were sitting around, tired and contemplative, wondering what any of it was for. From there, let's float across continents to the Indus Valley civilization, modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, around 2500 BCE. They left behind cities with straight streets, plumbing, and carefully measured bricks, but not much writing we can read. One of their most famous artifacts is the Dancing Girl of Mohenjo-daro, a small bronze figurine, just 7 inches tall, with one hand on her hip and an expression that says, "Yes, I own this place." She's poised, confident, almost defiant. It's a strange energy to see in something so ancient. Most early statues of women were symbols or deities, but she looks like a person, maybe a performer, maybe a teenager who posed for an artist and forgot about it. Archaeologists were baffled by her when they found her in the 1920s. One British scholar famously said she didn't look Indian, as if that somehow made her less authentic, which tells you more about the scholar than about her. She's very real, a survivor from a civilization that understood art, rhythm, and probably self-confidence better than we do. And while we're in that part of the world, let's stop by the Ashoka pillars in India, towering sandstone columns inscribed with Buddhist teachings, built by Emperor Ashoka around 250 BCE. Ashoka started his reign as a conqueror, slaughtering thousands at Then, overcome by guilt, he converted to Buddhism and started carving peace messages into rock. Basically, history's biggest rebrand. The pillars still stand across India and Nepal, many crowned with lions. They're strangely serene, huge stone billboards of moral reflection. Be kind, be honest, don't kill people, basic stuff emperors usually ignore. My favorite part is imagining the workers hauling those columns upright, sweating under the sun, probably wondering why their boss had suddenly gone spiritual after a career of carnage. Still, they did it. And thousands of years later, the message stands. Power fades, but stone sermons last. All these objects, the dancers, thinkers, soldiers, and stones, have one quiet thing in common. They were all made by hands. Human hands. Rough, scarred, probably tired, and sometimes trembling. We look at them now with distance and awe, but for their creators, they were daily work. Tools, rituals, pride, superstition, ordinary things that somehow slipped through time. And the funny thing, almost none of these makers expected their work to last. Most were probably focused on feeding their families, pleasing their gods, or not getting punished by kings. The idea that their creations would sit in climate-controlled rooms, watched by millions, that would have sounded absurd. But that's the magic of artifacts. They outlive context. They survive earthquakes, wars, floods, and stupidity. They become quiet witnesses to everything that came after. If you're still awake, congratulations. That means your curiosity is stronger than your melatonin. Tonight, we're slipping deeper into the ancient world, into places where artifacts weren't just decorations, but entire belief systems carved into stone. Let's start with a structure that's half temple, half obsession. The Temple of Karnak in Egypt. Karnak isn't a single building. It's a city of shrines, halls, and columns built over nearly 2,000 years. Every pharaoh who could afford it added their own bit, like insecure landlords renovating a place they'd never live in. Oh, Hatshepsut built a shrine here. Better double it. Ramesses carved his name there. Let's carve it bigger. The result is a labyrinth of stone so huge that even today, archaeologists still find new fragments under the sand. When you walk through it, the columns rise like petrified trees. Hieroglyphs still cover every inch. Endless prayers to gods whose names have faded from memory. It's almost funny. All that effort, all those chiseled praises, just so future tourists could wander through centuries later holding guidebooks that say, exact meaning unknown. Karnak isn't just an artifact. It's a monument to human repetition, to the idea that if you carve something enough times, maybe it'll last forever. And in a way, it did. The gods are gone, the empire is dust. But the stone remains now. Let's drift north, to the sun-bleached cliffs of Petra in modern Jordan. You've seen it in movies, probably with an archaeologist running from a boulder. But in real life, Petra is quiet, still, and almost melancholy. The Nabateans carved entire buildings into rock faces, facades taller than cathedrals, all pink and orange under desert light. The most famous one is Al-Khazna, the treasury which, spoiler alert, probably wasn't a treasury. It might have been a royal tomb, or a temple, or both. Scholars still argue about it, which, honestly, is half of archaeology. Petra's people were traders, middlemen between empires. They made their wealth from spice routes, camel caravans, and clever engineering, aqueducts that brought water through the desert. But then trade shifted. Rome came, earthquakes hit, the city emptied. For centuries, Petra was lost to outsiders. Local Bedouins kept it secret until a Swiss explorer rediscovered it in the 1800s, which is explorer speak, for was shown by people who already lived there. Now, it's one of the world's great archaeological sites, but also one of the loneliest. Those carved columns, those empty doorways, they look like they're still waiting for someone to come home. From the desert, let's move to the jungle, Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Built in the 12th century by the Khmer Empire, Angkor Wat started as a Hindu temple for Vishnu, then became Buddhist. It's the largest religious monument in the world, which is impressive, but also deeply impractical. It's a city made of stone, surrounded by water, carved with thousands of images of gods, ups, and stories looping endlessly around its walls. Imagine being one of those stonemasons, hammering away in the humid air day after day, carving divine figures into sandstone that you knew you'd never see finished. Most workers probably didn't even live long enough to see the temple completed. Centuries later, the jungle began reclaiming it. Roots wrapped around pillars, monkeys moved in, the moat filled with lotus flowers. When French explorers arrived in the 19th century, they described it like a dream half swallowed by the earth. That's the strange thing about human achievement. The higher we build, the faster nature starts planning the cleanup. Let's wander west for a bit, into the land of ancient Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, where one of the world's oldest temples hides under the dust. Göbekli Tepe, this site flipped archaeology upside down. It dates to around 9600 BCE, thousands of years before the pyramids or Stonehenge. And yet, it's full of carved stone pillars arranged in circles, decorated with animals and strange symbols. The weirdest part, it was built before agriculture, before pottery, before cities. These were hunter-gatherers, people without permanent homes, somehow organizing massive stone-building projects, which means religion might have come before civilization, not after. People didn't settle because of food. They settled because of ritual. And then, after centuries of using it, they buried the whole thing on purpose. No one knows why. Maybe it was sacred. Maybe it was superstition. Maybe someone said, let's move on. And they literally covered their past. Göbekli Tepe lay hidden for 10,000 years, until a farmer found it in the 1990s. That's a long nap, even by artifact standards. Let's step down the timeline to something a bit shinier, the Roman Pantheon. Most ancient temples are ruins. The Pantheon somehow still stands. Built around 125 CE under Emperor Hadrian, it has the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Still unbeaten 2,000 years later, modern engineers keep trying to figure out how it hasn't collapsed. The trick is the oculus, that open circle at the top that lets in light, rain, and occasionally pigeons. The walls are thicker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Roman concrete had volcanic ash that made it. Basically, they built something perfect and didn't even fully understand why it worked. When you stand inside, the dome feels alive, like it's breathing with the light. You can hear footsteps echo, smell incense, feel time just melt. The Romans dedicated it to all gods. Then the Christians turned it into a church. And now it's mostly for tourists trying to take symmetrical photos. Still, it remains what it always was. A quiet conversation between humanity and eternity. carried out in stone and geometry now, because history loves contradictions. Let's talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Discovered in the 1940s by Bedouin shepherds in caves near They're some of the oldest surviving texts of the Hebrew Bible, written on parchment, hidden in jars, and forgotten for 2,000 years. The scrolls are beautiful in their fragility, fragments of words, prayers, and laws. The handwriting varies, the ink fades. They were written by people living through chaos, hoping that divine truth might outlast destruction, and it did. Barely, when scholars began studying them. Arguments erupted over translation, ownership, theology. Every religion wanted a piece. Every academic wanted credit. You'd think sacred texts might inspire humility, but no. Human egos haven't evolved much since the Bronze Age. Still, the scrolls survived the desert, paper against sand, time, and politics. Proof that sometimes the smallest artifacts carry the loudest echoes. Since we're already surrounded by sacred words, let's drift to the Book of the Dead, Egypt's greatest literary export. It wasn't a single book, but a collection of spells and instructions painted on papyrus to help the dead navigate the afterlife. Sort of a celestial travel guide. If you meet a crocodile-headed god, say this. If your heart is weighed against a feather, keep calm and deny everything. Each version was customized for the buyer. The rich had theirs written in color, with illustrations. The poor, maybe just a few key spells. It's oddly practical, a DIY survival manual for eternity. And yet, for all its mysticism, it's deeply human. The Egyptians imagined judgment, anxiety, hope, all the same emotions we still carry. They just externalized them into art today. Those papyri sit behind glass, their ink barely visible, but the intention still clear. Nobody wanted to die unprepared. Let's take a slow detour to the highlands of Peru, where the Nazca lines stretch across the desert. Giant shapes of animals and patterns etched into the ground around 500 BCE. From the ground, they look like nothing. From the air, they're stunning hummingbirds, monkeys, spirals, straight lines stretching for miles. No one's completely sure what they were for. Some say astronomical markers, some say ritual pathways, and of course, some blame aliens, because when in doubt, aliens, the real explanation might be simpler. The Nazca people could have made them as offerings to gods above, artwork meant to be seen from the sky, not by human eyes, which is oddly poetic. Imagine spending weeks clearing stones, shaping lines you'll never fully see, trusting that your gods might notice from wherever they're watching. That's faith, or at least excellent project management. Let's move north to Mesoamerica, home of the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Olmecs before them. The Olmec colossal heads are among the strangest artifacts ever unearthed. Giant stone faces, up to 10 feet tall, weighing several tons, each with distinct features, calm expressions, and helmets that look vaguely sporty. No one knows exactly who they depict, rulers, warriors, or gods. The Olmec civilization disappeared long before anyone could ask them. But what's clear is that carving a face that large out of basalt and dragging it across jungles took serious commitment. They're eerie in their calm. You look into those faces and feel judged by something ancient, patient, and unimpressed. They've watched empires rise, fall, and argue about their meaning, and still they say nothing, which is probably wise. Now, since we're on the subject of silence, Let's head to Easter Island, or as the locals call it, Rapa Nui. The Moai statues stand with that same distant expression, stone heads gazing inland, not out to sea, like they're guarding the living rather than watching for visitors. There are hundreds of them, each carved from volcanic rock between the 13th and 16th centuries. Most people don't realize their bodies are buried underground. They're not just heads. Excavations reveal torsos covered in carvings, proving that even the most famous fragments of history are incomplete stories. The Moai were built by Polynesian settlers who somehow navigated thousands of miles of open ocean to reach this tiny island. They created complex rituals, social hierarchies, and eventually ecological disaster, cutting down too many trees to move their statues. When European ships arrived in the 1700s, the island's society was already collapsing. And yet, the Moai still stood, proud, sad, eternal. You can almost hear them whisper, "You came too late." Let's pause again. The world is full of artifacts like these, massive, beautiful, tragic testaments to ambition and belief. We call them ancient wonders, but they're really just reflections of ourselves, building too much, worshipping too hard, and leaving behind puzzles for someone else to clean up. The people who made them weren't so different from us. They wanted meaning, permanence, beauty. They wanted to be remembered. And maybe that's the only universal truth archaeology ever finds. Let's stay on the theme of mystery and silence for a moment. If you've ever looked at an artifact and thought, "This can't be real," you'd probably love the Antikythera mechanism. A corroded lump of bronze found in a shipwreck off a small Greek island in 1901. When divers pulled it up, they thought it was just another piece of junk. But decades later, X-ray scans revealed an impossible truth. Inside that rusted mass was a complex system of gears, dozens of them, perfectly engineered to track the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. It's basically a 2,000-year-old analog computer, and nobody knows who built it. The craftsmanship is so advanced that for years, historians refused to believe it could be ancient. They said, "This is too sophisticated for the Greeks." But it was real. It used a form of differential gearing that wouldn't appear again until the Renaissance. Some think it was designed by followers of Archimedes. Others think it was lost technology, something that appeared once and then vanished for centuries. Either way, it reminds us how fragile progress is. Civilization doesn't move in a straight line. Sometimes it loops, forgets, restarts. That lump of corroded bronze, once dismissed as scrap, turned out to be one of the most advanced machines of the ancient world. Proof that genius can sink, rot, and still whisper across time. From technology to something more spiritual. The Terracotta Army of China. In 1974, a group of farmers digging a well near Xi'an struck something hard underground. They kept digging and found faces, not bones, but clay. Life-size warriors, each with different features, hairstyles, and armor. What they uncovered was beyond imagination. Thousands of terracotta soldiers, horses, and chariots arranged in formation. An entire army buried to protect China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, in the afterlife. He was the man who unified China, standardized currency, built roads, started the Great Wall, and spent his life terrified of death. So he ordered an empire of clay to follow him underground. Archaeologists estimate that over 700,000 workers built the tomb complex. Many likely died during construction, their graves hidden within the emperor's eternal city. And inside the unexcavated burial chamber, legends say rivers of mercury still flow, part of his dream of immortality. He wanted to live forever. He didn't, but his army did. Row after row of silent faces, all staring at nothing, waiting for a command that will never come. Let's cross over to India, where the Iron Pillar of Delhi has been quietly confusing metallurgists for over 1,600 years. It stands about 7 meters tall, forged around the 4th century CE, and it hasn't rusted, not even in the monsoon air. Modern scientists call it an accidental masterpiece. The ancient blacksmiths who made it didn't know exactly why their method worked, but it did. The secret lies in the iron's high phosphorus content, which formed a thin protective film that prevents corrosion. It's one of those strange moments where luck and skill meet, where science existed before anyone could define it. It was originally erected in honor of Vishnu, but it outlasted empires, religions, and conquerors. Now it stands quietly near the Kutab miner, surrounded by tourists and pigeons, still refusing to rust. You can touch it, feel the chill of the metal, and know that somewhere between fire and faith, ancient hands forged something that time couldn't eat. And speaking of impossible endurance, there's Stonehenge. Everyone knows its shape. A ring of massive stones standing on the English plain. Everyone also has an opinion about what it was for. Temple, calendar, alien landing site. Take your pick. But here's what we do know. It wasn't built all at once. It evolved. Around 5,000 years ago, people dragged those stones, some weighing up to 25 tons, from over 100 miles away. No wheels, no cranes, just ropes, logs, and a lot of determination. It was likely aligned with the solstices, marking the longest and shortest days of the year. A cosmic clock built by farmers who probably couldn't read or write, but could read the sky better than we ever will. Standing there at sunrise, the light cuts through the stones in a perfect line. You can almost see what they saw. The turning of the year, the promise of another season, the same endless rhythm we still live by. The mystery isn't how they built it. It's why they cared enough to try. Let's move a little south, into the Mediterranean again, to Naissus, the palace of the Minoans on Crete. The ruins look peaceful now. Courtyards, red columns, faded frescoes, but in its time, Naissus was a maze of rooms and staircases, so complex it inspired the legend of the Minotaur, a creature half man, half bull, trapped in a labyrinth by King Minos. The myth might not be literal, but it fits. Archaeologists found strange bull symbols everywhere, horns carved into walls, paintings of people leaping over bulls as part of rituals. The palace had indoor plumbing, colorful art, and workshops for everything from pottery to goldsmithing. But it also had something darker, signs of sudden destruction. Earthquake, fire, invasion, maybe all three. When you walk through it now, the air feels heavy with stories, like the walls still remember. Civilization can vanish in a day, and all that's left is rumor. Let's drift east again, across the seas, to Japan, and a quiet grave in Nara known as the Hanawa burial field. During Japan's Kofun period, between the 3rd and 6th centuries, people buried clay figures, the Haniwa, around their tombs. Some are soldiers, some dancers, some animals, some strange geometric shapes. They weren't just decorations. They were guardians, meant to separate the world of the living from the dead. They stand expressionless, with hollow eyes and simple smiles. You look at them and feel both comforted and unnerved. When archaeologists found them, they realized each one was handmade, no molds, no repetition. Every figure unique, as if every spirit needed its own face. And when you see a field of them together, they look like an audience of ghosts watching the horizon. Silent, polite, eternal. Let's pause on something quieter. Music. The world's oldest known musical instrument is a flute made from a vulture's bone, found in a German cave. It's around 40,000 years old. Someone, somewhere in the Ice Age, took a bone, drilled holes in it, and made sound. That's the earliest proof that humans wanted to make beauty, not just survival. Before writing, before architecture, before pottery, there was music. Imagine the cold wind howling outside that cave, and a small melody rising inside, a fragile defiance against silence. The same instinct that built cathedrals, painted caves, and carved statues began with that sound. It's strange, isn't it? The first true artifact might not be something you can see. It might be something you can only hear for a few moments before it fades into the dark dot so far. We've seen temples, tombs, machines, armies, and music. Every one of them a message to the future that somehow survived the flood of time. And what connects them all isn't just craftsmanship or belief. It's obsession, the refusal to let go, the need to carve meaning into a world that doesn't promise any dot. Every culture, from Egypt to China to the Andes, built something that said, we were here, and we heard them. Let's start with something small, something shiny, something that's ruined more lives than it ever should have, the Hope Diamond. It started out as a deep blue diamond mine in India, somewhere around the 17th century. A French gem merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier bought it, or stole it, depending on which story you prefer, and brought it to Europe. It glittered like a piece of midnight. The French court loved it. Louis XIV had it recut and wore it proudly because, of course, he did. And things went fine for a while, until, well, France happened. The revolution came, heads rolled, and the diamond disappeared. It resurfaced years later in London, changed shape, smaller but still unnervingly blue. Everyone who owned it after that seemed to have some run of bad luck, death, debt, betrayal, ruin. Was it cursed? Probably not, but it's more fun to believe it was. Now it sits quietly in the Smithsonian, perfectly harmless behind glass, or at least pretending to be. From cursed jewels to a cursed statue, the bust of the pharaoh, Akhenaten. Akhenaten was the Egyptian king who tried to erase all the old gods and replace them with one, Aten, the sun disk. He closed temples, changed art styles, and basically appended centuries of religious life because he could dot after he died. Egypt wanted to forget him so badly they literally hammered his name off monuments. But art survived. And if you look at his statues, elongated face, strange lips, almost alien posture, they don't look like anyone else's. Some say he had a genetic condition. Others say it was deliberate, a symbol of divine weirdness. Either way, his busts give off an uncanny feeling. Too human, too not human. Even in museums, people say there's something unsettling about them, like the stone is breathing. It's not cursed, just unforgettable, which, for someone who wanted to be remembered forever, might be the closest thing to immortality he ever got. Next, let's move to the Baghdad Battery. In the 1930s, Archaeologists near Baghdad found clay jars with copper cylinders and iron rods inside, objects that looked suspiciously like early batteries. They dated back to around 200 BCE. When people saw them, theories exploded. Were the ancient Mesopotamians powering lights, electroplating jewelry, contacting aliens? No one really knows. The jars could have been simple storage vessels, or they could have been accidental electricity generators. Either way, they remind us how little we understand about how much people used to experiment. Not everything was ritual. Some of it might just have been curiosity, a few clever hands playing with what they found, and then forgetting it ever mattered. Let's drift north for a moment, to Denmark, and a body that refuses to stop telling stories. The Tolland man was found in 1950 in a peat bog, perfectly preserved. So perfect that at first, police thought he was a recent murder victim. But he wasn't. He'd been there for over 2,000 years. He still had a noose around his neck. His expression peaceful, eyes closed, mouth soft, as if sleeping. Scientists discovered he'd eaten porridge before he died, a last meal made from seeds and grains, and he'd been sacrificed. A ritual offering to some ancient god meant to keep the seasons turning. It's strange to look at him. His skin darkened by the bog, his face calm. He looks alive. Time dissolved around him but left him untouched. A man pulled halfway between death and eternity. You can stand inches away from him in a museum, and he's still there, quietly existing. Not a ghost, not a mummy, just ... waiting. Speaking of waiting, there's an artifact that quite literally listens. The Lycurgus cup. It's a Roman glass cup from the 4th century CE that changes color depending on the light. Green in normal light, blood red when illuminated from behind. For centuries, nobody could figure out how it worked. Modern scientists eventually discovered it contains nanoparticles of gold and silver, a technology far beyond what anyone expected from ancient craftsmen. It's basically a nanotech chalice. Imagine the Romans, drinking wine from something that shimmered from emerald to crimson as they moved it around. They probably thought it was magic, and maybe, in a way, it was. Now let's sink into something a little darker. The Nebuchadnezzar cylinder. This small clay cylinder looks unassuming, about the size of a soda can, but it carries the voice of a king who ruled Babylon 2,600 years ago. His inscriptions praise his building projects, his temples, his glory. Every line was meant to be read aloud in ritual. The cylinder wasn't for display, it was buried in the foundation of walls and temples. A divine record, sealed underground for eternity. The irony. It worked. We dug it up, and he's still speaking. His ego outlived his empire. It's easy to laugh at his self-importance. But maybe that's what all of us are doing when we write, build, record. Trying to echo, even when the world stops listening. Let's float over to another royal disaster. The Amber Room, built in the 18th century in Prussia. It was a chamber entirely made of amber panels, gold leaf, and mirrors. Imagine standing in a room that glows like liquid honey, every surface shimmering with fossilized sunlight. Catherine the Great adored it. Visitors described it as hypnotic. Then came World War II. The Nazis dismantled it, shipped it to Kingsburg, displayed it, and then it vanished. No one has ever found it. Not a single confirmed panel. Some say it was destroyed in bombing. Others say it's hidden in some abandoned bunker, buried in the earth. still glowing faintly in the dark. A masterpiece turned myth. If it does exist, it's probably quietly decaying. Amber, after all, is just hardened tree sap. Even beauty turns brittle eventually. And speaking of vanishing art, let's talk about the Roman dodecahedrons. Hundreds of these mysterious bronze objects have been found all over Europe. They're about the size of a baseball, 12-sided, with holes of varying diameters and knobs on each corner. No one knows what they were for. Guesses include everything from candle holders to measuring tools to fortune-telling devices. Some people think they were used for knitting gloves because history is full of disappointments. Whatever they were, they disappeared from use without explanation. No Roman text mentions them. No art shows them. It's as if they existed for one very specific reason, and then everyone agreed to forget. There's something kind of comforting about that. Not everything needs to be explained. Some artifacts are better as questions. Reminders that human creativity doesn't always come with instruction manuals. Because really, that's what most of history is. A collection of attempts. People made things. Some worked. Some didn't. Some just looked cool. And those that survived, we call them mysterious. But maybe they were just normal ones. Let's wander somewhere older. The Venus figurines, tiny statues carved tens of thousands of years ago. Round, faceless, exaggerated bodies. The most famous is the Venus of Willendorf, found in Austria. She's only about 4 inches tall, but she's been around for over 25,000 years. No eyes, number feet, no details except the curves. Some say she was a fertility symbol. Others think she was self-portraiture, early women carving their own forms from memory. We'll never know for sure. But it's strangely comforting that one of humanity's oldest surviving creations isn't a weapon or a tool. It's a body, life itself, shaped by hand and hope. There's something soft about that. A reminder that even when survival was everything, people still made art, still wanted to see beauty. Let's move forward in time, but not in brightness, to the Sutton Hoo burial. In 1939, just before World War II, archaeologists in England dug into a massive mound and found the ghost of a ship. The wood had rotted away, but the shape remained, a perfect imprint in the soil. Inside were treasures, gold buckles, silver bowls, a helmet shaped like a dragon, weapons, coins. It was probably the grave of a 7th century Anglo-Saxon king. But the strangest part wasn't the treasure. It was how careful everything was placed. Even in death, order mattered. The man buried there was meant to cross into the afterlife like a warrior setting sail. And maybe he did. The ship is gone, but the pattern stayed, pressed into the earth like a memory that refused to fade. And there's a quiet poetry in that. That absence itself became the artifact. Now, let's head south to the deserts of Peru, to the Nazca lines, enormous shapes carved into the ground, hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, long geometric patterns stretching for miles. You can't really see them from the ground. They only make sense from above, which has, of course, led to centuries of ancient alien theories. But the truth is simpler and probably more impressive. The Nazca people made them as ritual offerings, meant for their gods to see from the sky. They moved stones, scraped away the red desert gravel to reveal the pale earth beneath, and somehow kept the lines straight for miles. No rulers, no drones, just patience. And they lasted. 2,000 years later, they're still visible. That's persistence. The kind that makes you wonder if the gods they were calling to ever looked down, and maybe, just maybe, listened. Let's take a turn toward something smaller but stranger. The Phaistos disc, unearthed on the island of Crete in 1908. It's a clay disc covered in spiraling stamped symbols. It's about 3,700 years old, and to this day, no one has fully deciphered it. It could be a prayer, a story, a record, or complete nonsense. No other examples have ever been found. It's the only one. That's what makes it so eerie. It feels like a message written in a language that existed for one afternoon and then disappeared forever. Maybe someone made it for themselves. Maybe it was a child's toy or a sacred object. We'll never know. But whoever pressed those little symbols into clay didn't think they were making a mystery. They were just living their life. We're the ones who turned it into an enigma. And then there's the Koso artifact, a geode-like object found in California. In the 1960s, that supposedly contained a spark plug inside. People called it proof of ancient technology, or time travel, or aliens. In reality, it was just an old 1920s champion spark plug encased in a concretion of minerals. But the story spread faster than the truth. And that's another kind of artifact, the myth itself. Because myths are just stories that they harden around small facts until no one can tell what's real anymore. That's how history actually survives. Not through accuracy, but through persistence. Speaking of persistence, the Rosetta Stone might be the ultimate artifact of understanding. Before it was discovered in 1799, Egyptian hieroglyphs were just beautiful nonsense to scholars. The language of the pharaohs was lost. Then, a French soldier in Napoleon's army stumbled upon the stone while rebuilding a fort in Egypt. It had the same text written 3 times in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic. It became the key that unlocked thousands of years of silence. You'd think the stone would have looked majestic, but no. It's dark, chipped, and worn. Nothing fancy. And yet, it's the reason we can read the tombs, the temples, the prayers of an entire civilization. A cracked rock became the translator between worlds. Let's float to another quiet corner. Pompeii.yes. It's a city, not an artifact. But what's left of it, that's what matters. When Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, everything froze. People, animals, food, even shadows on the wall, sealed in volcanic ash like time itself, decided to take a snapshot. Centuries later, when it was excavated, what we found wasn't just death. It was life interrupted. Graffiti still scratched into the walls. A loaf of bread still in the oven. Dogs curled up where they slept. And in the plaster casts of the victims, you can see their faces. Surprise, fear, sometimes peace. Pompeii is a whole world caught mid-breath. It's tragic, yes, but also strangely gentle. A reminder that history isn't always ancient. Sometimes it's just paused. Now, let's drift north again, to Scotland, where the Lewis chessmen were found buried in sand in 1831. They're carved from walrus ivory, dating back to around 1150 CE, and each piece looks like it's quietly judging you. The kings are stern. The queens look mildly annoyed. The bishops seem exhausted. They were probably made in Norway and lost during travel. Someone buried them for safekeeping and never came back. There's something sad about that, but also comforting. These little faces, frozen in permanent disapproval, survived centuries of storms and shifting dunes. They were meant for games, but became witnesses. And maybe that's what every artifact is. A witness that can't forget. Let's end this part on something delicate. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in caves near Qumran in the 1940s. They're ancient Jewish texts, written over 2,000 years ago, preserved by accident. Some are biblical, some are apocryphal, some are shopping lists and community rules. They survived because a few scrolls were sealed in jars and hidden in dry desert caves, forgotten for millennia. And when they were found, they changed everything we knew about the origins of the Bible, of language, of belief itself, all because someone thought, maybe I'll just tuck these away for now. That's the power of accident. Sometimes the things that survive aren't the greatest works of humanity. They're just the ones that got lucky. So if there's a lesson in all this quiet wandering, it's that history doesn't always reward greatness. It rewards endurance. A scrap of pottery, a lost coin, a half-erased name. They outlive palaces. And when we stare at them in glass cases, what we're really looking at is persistence. The echo of hands that refuse to stop making. Let's walk down into a cave. It's dark. The air smells of stone and earth, and the walls are covered in paint. You're in Lascaux, France. About 17,000 years ago, someone stood here with a torch made of burning moss, mixing pigments of iron oxide, charcoal, and clay. They painted bulls, horses, and deer. Some of the animals overlap, as if the painters were layering their memories. They didn't sign their work. They didn't name the place, but they painted it carefully, almost reverently. It wasn't decoration, it was connection. Maybe they were asking the hunt to be kind. Maybe they were trying to remember what they'd seen thousands of years later, when it was discovered by accident in 1940. The first people who entered the cave said it felt like walking into a cathedral. They were right. It's a place built not of stone, but of story. And what's strange is, even after all this time, the paintings still glow softly under the light, as if the walls are breathing. From the deep caves of France, let's cross to the deep sands of Egypt, to King Tutankhamun's tomb. Everyone knows the gold mask, the treasures, the curse. But the story behind it is much quieter. Howard Carter, the British archaeologist who discovered the tomb in 1922, had been searching for years. He was nearly out of money, nearly out of patience. Then one day, a water boy tripped over a buried stone, and beneath it was the staircase that led to the find of a lifetime. When they opened the door, the room glowed with untouched gold. No tomb raider had ever gotten there. It was like opening a time capsule sealed by the gods themselves. But Tutankhamun wasn't a great pharaoh. He died young, probably sick, barely known in his own time. Ironically, his short, quiet life became the most famous afterlife in all of Egypt. Maybe there's a lesson in that. That history sometimes saves the wrong people, or maybe just the lucky ones. Now, let's pause in Greece, where the Antikythera mechanism was pulled from the sea. A group of sponge divers found it in 1901, tangled in coral and bronze. It turned out to be an ancient analog computer, gears, dials, inscriptions, built more than 2,000 years ago. It could predict eclipses, planetary movements, even track the cycles of the Olympic Games. It's like something Da Vinci would have built, except it existed long before Da Vinci was born. We don't know who made it, or how many like it once existed. Only fragments remain. But it changes how we see the past, not as simple or primitive, but as brilliant and inventive. Imagine the hands that turned those gears, The eyes that watched tiny bronze planets orbit across a dial. Now imagine it. Sinking, lost for centuries, waiting in silence for someone to notice again. And when they did, the world had to rewrite its assumptions about ancient minds. Let's take a gentler path to China and the Terracotta Army. In 1974, farmers digging a well near Xi'an hit something hard. They thought it was a piece of old pottery. It wasn't. It was a warrior, life-sized, detailed, and made of clay. Soon they uncovered thousands more, all buried with the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, to protect him in the afterlife. Each face is unique. Each soldier has a different expression, hairstyle, or armor pattern. No one knows the names of the artists who made them, but they must have numbered in the thousands. It's both magnificent and chilling. An entire clay army built for a man who was terrified of death. He built a kingdom underground because he couldn't bear to let go of power. And now, his army stands silently in lines, century after century, guarding a man who turned to dust. Then there's something smaller. The Baghdad battery, found in Iraq. It's a clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod inside. Some think it was used as a simple battery thousands of years before electricity was discovered. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just a storage jar or a tool for gilding or chemistry. No one knows. Still, the idea of electricity flickering in the ancient world feels strangely right. Like humanity has always been experimenting, even in the dark. We keep poking at the unknown with whatever tools we have. Let's stop at the Shigir idol, a wooden statue found in a Siberian peat bog in 1890. It's about 12,000 years old, carved with mysterious zigzags and faces. It's the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. The patterns might be symbolic, maybe maps, maybe warnings, maybe prayers. But the thing that makes it beautiful is its survival. Wood should have rotted long ago. It lived because the bog preserved it, sealing it in silence. It's a miracle of chance, like the world decided to save one piece of memory just to prove it could. Back in Europe, another enigma waits. The Voynich manuscript, a 15th century book written in an unknown language, filled with strange diagrams of plants, stars, and women bathing in green pools. No one has been able to read it. No one knows who wrote it or why. It could be an elaborate hoax, a lost language, or something we simply don't understand yet. But whatever it is, it's mesmerizing. Someone poured their time and obsession into it, page after page, and now it's the ultimate unsolved riddle of history. What if it's just a diary that never found its reader? Let's drift back to Egypt for one last mystery of this part. The Dendera light. Inside the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, there's a carving that looks, to modern eyes, like a giant light bulb. People say it proves the Egyptians knew electricity, but art historians explain it differently. It's likely a lotus flower holding a snake, symbolizing creation and rebirth. Still, the resemblance is uncanny. Maybe that's the point. Maybe history rhymes with the future by accident. We see ourselves in the past, even when we shouldn't. Artifacts aren't just what's left behind, they're mirrors. We look at them and see what we want: faith, science, tragedy, beauty. But under all of it, there's a single truth. People made these things. People like us, curious, afraid, hopeful, and messy. And somehow, their fingerprints reached across centuries to touch ours. We've wandered through forgotten caves, cursed tombs, and underwater mysteries. So it's only fair we now explore the world of relics. Relics are humanity's way of keeping ghosts close. A bone, a tooth, a fragment of cloth, all treated like a hotline to heaven. In medieval Europe, you couldn't build a proper cathedral without at least one. Some were real, many weren't, but people didn't seem to mind either way. Let's start small, with a tooth of St. John the Baptist. Actually, make that teeth plural. There were dozens scattered across Europe. If you'd collected them all, you could have built a new saint from scratch in the 12th century. Churches competed for relics, like influencers chasing followers. The more famous the saint, the bigger the crowds. The bigger the crowds, the fuller the donation box. It was spiritual marketing, and it worked. Pilgrims would travel for months just to see a bone in a golden box. They'd cry, pray, and leave coins, believing that being near holiness meant catching a little of it yourself. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful, if a bit unhygienic. For something shinier, the Holy Lance, also called the Spear of Destiny. It's the spear that supposedly pierced the side of Jesus during the crucifixion. Over the centuries, several lances claimed the title. Each one had a dramatic story, a powerful owner, and a suspiciously convenient discovery date. One version ended up with the Holy Roman Emperors. They said it granted divine legitimacy, basically a celestial thumbs up for ruling Europe. Another version popped up centuries later and somehow made its way into Nazi hands during World War II. Because apparently, if there's an ancient artifact involved, someone in a uniform will try to weaponize it. Was it the real spear? Probably not. But the power wasn't in the metal, it was in belief. And belief is always the most dangerous kind of relic. Let's float east for a moment. To India, where relics took a gentler form. Buddhist monks kept relic stupas, holding ashes teeth or fragments of the Buddha's bones. Each stupa became a focus of calm devotion. Pilgrims didn't come for spectacle. They came for stillness. One famous relic, a supposed tooth of the Buddha, was said to shimmer with light. It moved from India to Sri Lanka, guarded by kings who believed that whoever held the tooth held divine right to rule. Funny how even in peace-loving traditions, power always finds its way in. Let's step into a monastery in France. Around the 10th century, you'd find monks guarding a glass case holding the foreskin of Jesus. Yes, you heard that right. It was claimed to be the only physical remnant left from his earthly body. At least 14 churches claimed to have it at one point or another. Some were stolen, others mysteriously multiplied. Eventually, the Vatican quietly stopped talking about it altogether, which is probably for the best. Still, for hundreds of years, people made pilgrimages to see it. They prayed, sang hymns, and believed that holiness could survive in the most unexpected forms. You have to admire that kind of faith, or at least their persistence. Now, over to Constantinople, where relic collecting became a royal obsession. Byzantine emperors filled their palaces with pieces of the true cross, saints' bones, and even the Virgin Mary's veil. It was like a divine museum or a very expensive insurance policy. After all, if you owned enough holy objects, maybe God would notice you first when handing out miracles. When the Crusaders sacked Constantinople in 1204, they looted most of it. The relics scattered across Europe, some to Venice, some to Paris, some simply disappeared. It was the holy version of a yard sale, and centuries later, those same relics became the centerpiece of Europe's grandest cathedrals. Even stolen faith, it turns out, still draws a crowd. Let's visit one of those cathedrals. Chartres in France. It holds a piece of cloth said to be the Virgin Mary's veil. Whether it truly belonged to her or not, no one knows. But when people look at it, they feel something deep and ancient, a tenderness, maybe. It's not the fabric itself, but the weight of all the prayers whispered toward it. That's what relics really hold, not power, but echoes. Echoes of hope, grief, and the very human need to believe that something lasts forever. And not all relics were sacred. Some were just weird, like the hand of glory, a mummified hand from a hanged criminal, supposedly used by thieves. You'd dip it in wax, light the fingers like candles, and it was said to freeze people in place. Medieval folks loved that sort of thing, equal parts horror and practicality. Of course, none of it worked, but that didn't stop them from trying. Belief again, doing its favorite trick, bending fear into ritual. In a quieter corner of Europe, relics turned more personal. People started saving locks of hair, hearts, and even eyeballs of loved ones. Napoleon's hair, Shelley's heart, Beethoven's ear bones, tiny pieces of great people kept in jars or lockets, as if genius might rub off by proximity. And maybe that's not so different from the old relics. We still do it today, keeping a jacket, a letter, a photograph. Objects that outlive the moments they came from. Little time capsules of emotion. That's the modern relic. Just with less gold and slightly fewer saints. Now, let's head far north to Iceland, where the lines between relic and magic get very blurry. There, in the old sagas, people carried magical staves carved with runes. One was called the Gishgelma, the Helm of Awe. It was said to give courage and strike fear into enemies. Others used carved symbols for luck, love, or revenge. Wood, bone, or even fish skin, whatever worked. It wasn't religion, exactly, but it served the same purpose, to turn the unknown into something you could hold. Because when life is unpredictable, the human instinct is always to reach for an object. Some relics were born from tragedy. Think of Pompeii, frozen in ash. Every cast of a human figure there is a relic, not of sainthood, but of survival and loss. The plaster molds of people clutching each other, covering their faces. They're more haunting than any jewel-encrusted bone. They remind us that the real relics aren't gold or sacred. They're the quiet things left behind when everything else falls apart. Let's move quietly to Jerusalem, where every stone feels like it's holding a confession. There's one relic that's always drawn people in, the true cross. The story goes that it was found by Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, around the 4th century. She supposedly unearthed 3 crosses and had to figure out which one was the cross. According to legend, they tested them on a sick woman. She touched the first, nothing. The second, still nothing. The third, she stood up, miraculously healed. And so, Helena declared, this one was the real deal. Fragments of that cross were soon everywhere. Every major church wanted a piece. By the Middle Ages, you could have built a small forest from all the true cross splinters in circulation. Some scholars joked that if you gathered them all, you could reconstruct Noah's Ark. Still, people believed. They didn't need proof, just comfort. From sacred wood to something smaller, stranger, saint's blood. There's a church in Naples that holds a vial said to contain the blood of Saint Genuine. 3 times a year, it's brought out before a crowd. If the blood liquefies, it's a sign of blessing. If not, people start worrying. No one knows exactly why or how it works. Chemists have tried to explain it, suggesting temperature changes or chemical reactions. But for locals, it's simpler. it's tradition. You just watch and hope the red swirl starts to move. Faith can be fragile like that, but it's also oddly steady. You keep doing the same ritual for centuries, just in case it still means something. Now, let's wander north again to England, where relics once shaped politics. Before Henry VIII broke from Rome, monasteries all across the country held collections of relics that drew pilgrims from every corner. There were bones of saints, shreds of the Virgin's veil, feathers from Gabriel's wings, and, my personal favorite, a bottle of the Virgin Mary's milk. Yes, someone bottled holiness. When the Reformation came, the king's men tore those relics down, smashed the shrines, melted the gold. Faith was replaced by paperwork. Miracles were replaced by bureaucracy. But you have to imagine the silence afterward. The sound of centuries of devotion suddenly gone. Even if you weren't religious, that loss must have felt heavy. Let's step back to the mainland, to Germany, where relics became less about saints and more about memory. After the 30 Years' War, some towns started keeping war relics. Broken swords, cannonballs, even fragments of church bells. They weren't worshipped, just kept. People wanted to remember what they'd survived. Those relics told their own kind of prayer, one that said, "Never again." Sometimes the sacred isn't divine. It's just deeply human. But relics didn't always stay still. They wandered, got stolen, got lost. Like St. Nicholas, the real one, not the red-suited modern version. He was buried in Myra, in what's now Turkey. In the 11th century, sailors from Bari, Italy, decided the saint would be safer with them, which is a polite way of saying they robbed his grave. They smuggled his bones back home, built a grand basilica, and claimed divine approval. To be fair, they did keep the bones well. And now, every December, his remains still release an oily substance called manna that's collected and blessed. Science says it's probably condensation. Faith says it's a miracle. Either way, it's excellent marketing for Christmas. Let's look at another bone-related mystery: Joan of Arc's relics. For centuries, France claimed to hold her charred remains, a few ribs, a fragment of skull. When scientists finally tested them in 2007, they turned out to be the bones of an Egyptian mummy mixed with cat remains. Somewhere, a medieval relic dealer is still laughing. It's easy to mock that kind of gullibility. But there's tenderness in it too. People wanted a way to keep Joan alive, to hold a piece of her courage in their hands. And if a few cat bones helped them do that, well, fair enough. Let's glide east again to Ethiopia, home of one of the most mysterious relics of all, the Ark of the Covenant. It's said to rest in a chapel in Axum, guarded by one monk who's not allowed to leave. No one else may look at it. Not scholars, not tourists, not even the patriarch himself. Whether it's really there or not, no one knows, and maybe that's the point. Sometimes mystery is more powerful than proof. People make pilgrimages to Axum not to see the Ark, but to stand near it, to feel that something sacred might still be hiding in this loud, modern world. Some relics don't belong to any religion. They just cling to fame. Take Galileo's finger, for instance. When his body was moved to a new tomb in 1737, admirers quietly removed some pieces, a finger, a tooth, a vertebra. They kept them like souvenirs. The middle finger, of course, is now displayed in a glass orb in Florence, pointed toward the sky. A perfect tribute to a man who spent his life defying authority. Or think of Abraham Lincoln's blood-stained pillow. still kept at the Peterson House in Washington, or Queen Victoria's handkerchief embroidered with her tears after Prince Albert's death, or the violin that played on as the Titanic sank. These are modern relics, relics of emotion, not salvation. Each one asks the same question: how do we keep love, pain, or awe from slipping away? We can't, really, but we keep trying by saving the things that touched it. There's a certain rhythm to relics: discovery, devotion, doubt. They remind us that humans are collectors of meaning. We take dust, bone, or cloth and turn it into proof that we were here, or that something greater might still be listening. Every relic, sacred or strange, is a quiet conversation between the living and the dead. It says, "You mattered once, and I still believe you do." Hey guys, tonight we're stepping carefully into artifacts that didn't just outlast their owners, they seemed to carry moods. Objects that made people pause, hesitate, sometimes regret ever touching them. Not everything ancient wants to be remembered. Let's begin with the Hope Diamond again, because it's worth repeating. It's not just blue and beautiful, it's famous for its supposed curse. Owners died unexpectedly, went bankrupt, or saw misfortune tumble onto them. Some scientists say it's coincidence. Others point out that the jewel passed through incredibly wealthy, high-profile families who tend to have complicated lives anyway. Still, the legend stuck. People avoided it, feared it, whispered about it. Even today, it sits quietly in the Smithsonian, behind glass, perfectly harmless. Or so we hope now, for something a little smaller, a little sharper. The Kainur diamond. Originating in India, it passed through Mughal, Persian, Afghan, and Sikh hands before arriving in Britain. Every transfer of ownership brought intrigue, betrayal, or war. Queens and kings wore it, but it seemed to carry tension along with sparkle. It's a jewel, yes, but it's also a reminder that luxury often travels with misfortune. Let's wander north to Tutankhamun's tomb, and the curse that followed its discovery in 1922. Howard Carter found the tomb after years of searching. The world was enchanted by the untouched treasures. Then, one by one, members of the team died unexpectedly. Lord Carnarvon, the financier, died of an infected mosquito bite shortly after the tomb opened. Newspapers blew it into a cursed story. The rest of the team mostly survived. Still, the idea of an ancient curse became part of the tomb's legend, part of its allure, quietly unnerving down. Let's drift east to China and the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The first emperor, he was obsessed with immortality. He built an underground palace filled with rivers of mercury. The terracotta army was meant to guard him forever. When explorers came later, they found elevated mercury levels in the soil, a toxic, invisible legacy. So, in a way, the emperor's obsession with eternity created a silent hazard for centuries. Artifacts, sometimes, carry danger just in their presence. Back in Europe, there's the cursed violin, the so-called Helia Stradivarius. It was said to bring misfortune to anyone who played it. Owners reported accidents, heartbreak, or strange illnesses. Stradivarius violins are famous for sound, but some legends claim this one sounded a little too sharp. Whether it's truth or coincidence, the story spread. And as with most cursed objects, fear became part of the artifact's identity. Let's wander into the slightly macabre, the hands of glory. Mummified hands of executed criminals, sometimes fitted with candles. Supposedly, lighting the fingers would freeze people in place. a very literal frozen moment. In France and England, thieves carried them around for luck. It didn't always work, but the objects carried the weight of imagination, the belief that a hand could enforce silence. History is full of objects that gain power because people think they have it. From hands to hearts, the heart of Anne Boleyn. After her execution, Henry VIII allegedly kept her heart in a gold container. Maybe he wanted to remember her, or maybe it was a morbid token of guilt. Either way, it became a relic of sorrow, obsession, and courtly intrigue. Some say it still rests in a private collection. Others think it's long gone. But the story persists, as do artifacts shaped by human emotion. Now, to a more famous curse, the terracotta warriors of Xi'an again, but not the army itself. Excavators report strange mishaps while digging, from collapsing tunnels to sudden illnesses. Probably coincidence. Probably not. Still, it gives a sense that some objects, when disturbed, push back, not with magic, but with the weight of human history. And then there's the poppy skull, a carved skull made entirely from bone. From the 17th century, it was used as a memento mori, a reminder of death. Some owners reported nightmares, despair, or unease in its presence. It's just a carved skull. But when objects remind you of your mortality, they have a strange way of affecting your mind. Let's drift to something quieter. Mirror superstitions in 18th century Europe. Mirrors were considered not just reflective, but dangerous. Breaking one meant 7 years of bad luck. Some mirrors were used in magic rituals to trap souls. Some families covered them after death to prevent the spirit from lingering. Objects gain power from belief, not intrinsic magic. That's why relics, jewels, and mirrors can all curse their owners. Fear becomes the artifact itself. Now, to the cursed amethyst cross of medieval France. It was said to bring sorrow to any bishop who wore it. Bishops fell ill, lost political power, or faced scandal. Historians now believe it was coincidence, but rumors were enough to ensure that future bishops avoided it. Sometimes, the legend outlives the object, becomes more real than the thing itself. Let's drift over to the Kainor once more, because its story doesn't end with crowns and kings. The diamond traveled through empires, battles, and marriages. Every new owner seemed to inherit a fresh layer of tension, politics, war, betrayal. When it reached Britain in the 19th century, Queen Victoria reportedly found it beautiful, but also intimidating. Some claim she said it was cursed for men, which, conveniently, made it safe for queens. So here's a diamond that sparkles brilliantly, yet carries whispers of misfortune. A reminder that sometimes beauty comes with a subtle chill. Moving north to Russia, there's a small wooden icon called the Black Madonna of Czestochowa. Legends say it was burned, slashed, and attacked many times. Yet the image survived, seemingly untouched. Miracles were reported whenever the icon was in danger, storms clearing the way, enemies failing to desecrate it fully. Some say it was divinely protected. Others note the resilience of paint, wood, and human care. Either way, it became a symbol of survival, a relic cursed only to those who dared harm it now. Let's quietly look at the cursed mummy of Pharaoh Ramses II. Not because he was unlucky in life, but because when his tomb was opened in 1881, the archaeologists noticed a strange sequence of misfortunes. One by one, members of the excavation team fell ill. Others faced strange accidents. No one can say if the pharaoh's spirit was annoyed, or if it was simply coincidence. Still, the story persists, because humans love a narrative with shadows. And in England, there's the cursed portrait of the Duke of Wellington. It was said that anyone who mocked or disrespected it would fall ill or encounter financial misfortune. Mostly, this was polite superstition, a way to keep visitors respectful. But the portrait's reputation grew to the point where even staff tiptoed around it. Sometimes a curse is simply social pressure wrapped in legend. And just as effective, let's wander back to France, to the famous cursed mirror of Chambord. It's a large, ornate mirror rumored to show strange reflections, figures that aren't there. Visitors claimed to see shadows, fleeting shapes, or even faces staring back with subtle malice. Skeptics chalk it up to light and imagination. Yet for centuries, the stories persisted, and the mirror became part of local folklore. It's another example of how an object's curse can exist entirely in the human mind, yet still affect behavior, from mirrors to books. We find cursed artifacts in another form, the Codex Gigas. Also called the Devil's Bible, is massive, dark, and full of unusual illustrations. Legend says a monk made a pact with the devil to finish it in a single night. Some readers swear it carries a malevolent energy. Others simply marvel at its size and the detailed illustrations. Either way, it survived centuries of handling, wars, and fires, and perhaps part of its curse is just that, enduring when everything else fell away. Let's pause for a quieter, more human cursed artifact, personal jewelry believed to bring misfortune in Europe. People often passed rings, necklaces, or bracelets that had unlucky associations. A widow's ring might carry grief. A battle-worn pendant could carry the weight of death. The objects themselves were mundane, but the stories attached to them turned them into relics of emotion. It's subtle, it's quiet, and it's surprisingly effective, because we humans are very good at believing in the invisible. Moving to the cursed swords of Japan, known as Tsuba, or sometimes whole blades imbued with the spirit of vengeance. Some samurai claimed their swords would refuse to cut a betrayer. Others said blades would shatter unexpectedly if used for dishonorable purposes. Was it supernatural? No, likely metallurgy and skill. But the belief in the swords, spirit-shaped actions, strategy, and honor codes. Objects carrying curses often teach lessons without speaking a word. Finally, let's look at the terracotta warriors one last time, not as soldiers, but as silent witnesses, even after centuries. Researchers report small accidents during excavation, broken pottery, collapsing earth, minor illnesses among staff. Probably coincidence. Probably not. Either way, these artifacts remind us that touching the past can feel like entering someone else's carefully preserved world, and that world may be stubbornly protective of its secrets. Cursed artifacts, in the end, are rarely dangerous on their own. The danger lives in perception, belief, and the way humans weave stories around objects. Fear and fascination make history linger, slow and heavy like a soft blanket over the centuries. Let's start with medieval chastity belts. Yes, the infamous devices designed to protect women's virtue. Most surviving examples are probably 18th century fabrications or exaggerated for display. But the stories persist. They're heavy, uncomfortable, and rather impractical, yet they appear in museums, quietly rattling their tiny locks. You can imagine the blacksmiths who forged them, or the noblemen who commissioned them, or the women who actually wore them. It's an artifact that whispers tension, control, and a hint of absurdity, from belts to the sterling prize of the bizarre. Medieval torture instruments preserved in museums. Some are elaborate, others minimal. Chains, racks, iron masks shaped like birds or beasts. Most were intended to intimidate rather than harm permanently, though the line was thin. These artifacts linger not because of their elegance, but because of human fascination with the macabre. They remind us that fear has always been part of the decorative arts, and that people will keep almost anything if it tells a story. Let's float across the Mediterranean to Byzantium, where strange everyday objects became relics of imperial whimsy. Some palace artifacts were purely ornamental: gold spoons shaped like animals, drinking cups with faces that grimaced as you drank, or combs inlaid with semi-precious stones. They seem useless at first glance, but in context, they were status symbols, tools for storytelling, or just quiet ways to show wealth. History has a soft sense of humor, and these objects are it now. Let's explore the Japanese netsuke, tiny carvings that were both functional and whimsical. Originally used as toggles to hold items like pouches or pipes on a kimono sash, they ranged from realistic animals to bizarre creatures, demons, and mythical beings. Some are so small, it's impossible to imagine the patience and dexterity required to carve them. And yet, thousands survive today. They're a testament to human creativity, patience, an obsession with detail. Across the oceans, in South America, the Mocha portrait vessels of Peru are equally fascinating. The Mocha people created ceramic vessels shaped like human faces, capturing expressions that are startlingly realistic. Grimaces, laughter, sadness, all frozen in clay. Sometimes they represent real individuals, sometimes gods. And they survived centuries of conquest, climate, and neglect. Objects like this persist because someone once thought they mattered enough to craft meticulously, and that intention echoes through time. Back in Europe, there's the mysterious mechanical birds of the Renaissance. Inventors crafted automata, small birds that flapped wings, sang, or moved realistically. Leonardo da Vinci made some of the earliest versions, but many others existed. They seem frivolous, toys for the wealthy, yet they reveal a fascination with life, motion, and imitation. The fact that a few still work today is proof of both craftsmanship and sheer luck. Let's pause in ancient Egypt, where cosmetic palettes were often decorated with animals, geometric patterns, and tiny carvings. Some palettes are massive, elaborately carved, yet they were just for grinding pigment for makeup. Art and utility intertwined. People used them daily, then buried them with the dead. Thousands of years later, we look at them and marvel at the combination of function and whimsy. Now, a slightly stranger category: ritual objects whose purpose is lost. Archaeologists sometimes uncover items they can't identify. Sticks carved with symbols, small metal tools of unclear function, containers with unknown substances. We know they mattered to someone. We just don't know why. Part of the magic of these artifacts is that silence. They survived, even though their meaning has drifted away. In Europe again, there are Venetus objects, small skulls, hourglasses, or decayed fruit depicted in art. They were reminders of mortality. Objects meant to be temporary, to spark reflection, yet many survive centuries later. The irony is soft, almost sleepy. Objects meant to remind us of death endure far longer than the people who made them. Then there's the medieval book curse, literally inscribed curses to ward off theft. Librarians and monks sometimes wrote warnings inside manuscripts. Whosoever steals this book shall be cursed with misfortune. Often, these were the only decorations in an otherwise plain book. Rarely, someone tried to steal them. Mostly, they remained untouched for centuries. Another quiet example of how human superstition attaches itself to everyday items. From books to coins with odd imagery, ancient and medieval coins often depict faces, animals, or symbols we no longer understand. Some coins were minted with errors, strange shapes, or mystical symbols. Collectors centuries later marvel at them. What was once pocket change becomes a window into belief, humor, and accidental creativity. Finally, a nod to apparently useless artifacts that survive purely because they're beautiful. The ivory chess pieces of Lewis are carved with such delicate detail that it's a wonder they weren't lost to time. The artistry preserved them long after the games themselves faded. Sometimes, survival isn't about function, luck, or superstition. It's simply about humans making something exquisite, and someone else caring enough to protect it. Let's drift to the medieval puzzle jugs of Europe. At first glance, they're simple ceramic vessels, but each one has a perforated neck, cleverly designed so you can't drink without solving a little puzzle. Spills, tricks, and confusion were part of the fun or frustration, depending on your patience. They survived because people liked challenges, and probably because they were amusing at dinner parties. Artifacts like these remind us that history isn't always grave and serious. Sometimes it's clever, playful, or just plain mischievous. Now, to the ancient Roman curse tablets, called defixiones, thin sheets of lead with inscriptions, often folded and thrown into wells or graves. People cursed rivals, lost lovers, or enemies. Sometimes, they even invoked gods to tie someone's shoelaces in knots. Figuratively speaking, they were mundane objects with tiny pieces of human spite baked into them. Centuries later, archaeologists find them and imagine the people who carefully wrote these curses, whispering under their breath. Ordinary human frustration, preserved in lead. Let's drift to the Ottoman coffee cup fortune-telling tools. After drinking coffee, leftover grounds would be interpreted for meaning. Some cups were engraved with symbols meant to guide the reader. Totally mundane in daily use, yet they carried stories, superstitions, and hope. The cups themselves survive in museums, silent witnesses to tiny moments of aspiration, fear, or hope. Ordinary objects, extraordinary imagination in Renaissance Europe. We find singing bowls and automata toys, small mechanical figures that moved, sang, or performed simple tasks. Some were elaborate, with moving birds, dancers, or tiny musicians, like miniature magic shows frozen in wood and metal. They might seem frivolous, yet they were precious possessions, passed down generations. And today, their tiny gears still whisper the patience and creativity of their makers. Moving east, there are Chinese puzzle locks, small lock mechanisms requiring secret movements to open, sometimes intricate, sometimes absurdly complicated. They were functional, yet also playful, a quiet expression of ingenuity. The objects survived because they amused, protected, or simply fascinated. Curiosity itself can preserve history now, a gentle oddity. The baby shoes in museums, tiny shoes of children long gone. kept because they represent a moment, a family, a life that touched someone's heart. They survived not for function, but for sentiment. History is full of these small, fragile objects that mean little practically, yet everything emotionally across the seas in Africa. We see divination boards and charm objects, used to interpret signs, predict outcomes, or hold symbolic power, sometimes simple, sometimes intricately carved. They survive in collections, giving us glimpses into daily lives, fears, and hopes of people long gone. Objects with stories embedded in them, not grand historical events, but quiet, intimate human experience back to Europe. The spoon of authority. Some medieval guilds and households kept ornate spoons as symbols of office. They were functional utensils, yes, but also ceremonial artifacts, preserved not for eating, but for recognition, ceremony, and status, small objects, yet significant. And they survived precisely because they were treasured. Then there's the oddly shaped reliquary containers, sometimes in the forms of boots, hands, or miniature buildings. Their purpose was mostly devotional, but their shapes often seem whimsical. They survived because of sacred association, because someone cared enough to protect them for centuries, even if we don't understand the original intent. Their charm persists. Finally, let's consider everyday pottery that outlived empires. Jars, bowls, cups, ordinary objects. Discarded, buried, yet surviving millennia. We can hold them, see fingerprints, traces of use, and faint stains. They remind us of human lives that were slow, quiet, and unremarkable. Sometimes survival isn't about brilliance or beauty. It's about touch, care, and persistence. Tonight, we're slowing even further, settling into the quiet corners of history where ordinary lives are preserved in small, delicate objects. No crowns or curses this time, just traces of humanity, whispering across centuries. Let's begin with letters, one of the most personal forms of survival in the 18th century. Letters were sometimes the only way to stay in touch across long distances. People wrote about love, longing, fear, and boredom. Some letters survive because someone treasured them. Some were discarded, others hidden in boxes, only rediscovered centuries later. The handwriting itself tells a story. The careful loops, hurried scratches, and occasional smudges. Even without reading the words, you can feel the presence of a human being, somewhere between hope and loneliness down. To clothing as a relic. A 17th century dress preserved in a museum might seem like fabric, stiff and faded. But every tear, every patch, every stain is a whisper of life. A child spilled wine at dinner, a seamstress stitched late into the night. A mother folded it with care. Clothing is ephemeral by nature. It decays, frays, and fades. Yet when it survives, it carries warmth, shape, and human intention. Let's pause for childhood toys. Small objects that outlast their owners. Dolls, carved animals, tiny wooden soldiers. Often worn, sometimes broken. Some were buried with children, others hidden in chests and forgotten attics. A carved toy soldier from 19th century Germany, smooth from handling, might have been part of a child's quiet afternoons, hours spent imagining battlefields. Centuries later, it survives as a vessel of play, memory, and imagination. Across Europe, mourning jewelry became intimate relics of grief. Rings, brooches, lockets containing hair from a deceased loved one. Some even held miniature portraits. They were private, quiet, and intensely sentimental. People carried grief literally on their bodies. Centuries later, these objects remind us that human emotion has a physical echo. Grief, love, memory compacted into gold, hair, and enamel. Now, 2 personal diaries and journals. Few survive intact, but those that do offer windows into the mundane. What did someone eat for breakfast? Who annoyed them at market? What dreams kept them awake? A diary isn't grand history, it's tiny history. Yet it survives because someone cared enough to write, and someone else cared enough to keep it. Let's look at amulets and charms carried in pockets, small stones, carved talismans, pieces of wood, metal, or bone. People carried them for luck, protection, or memory. Sometimes they were passed down generations. Other times, they were buried with the owner. A tiny carved charm might survive for centuries. It's modest, unremarkable to the outside world. But for the person who held it, it mattered everything now. Will float 2 letters of soldiers, tucked into boots or belts. During wars, letters were lifelines. A folded piece of paper could mean hope, connection, or consolation. Many were never sent, some were lost, and some survive in archives. When we read them, we hear voices soft and intimate, far removed from battles or strategies. These artifacts carry human presence more strongly than grand monuments. Next, maps and sketches, often personal and practical. A merchant's hand-drawn map of trade routes. A cartographer's careful sketch of a coastline. Not impressive in scale, but intimate, detailed, and deeply human. They survive because someone needed them, and someone else preserved them. They whisper not just of geography, but of curiosity and care. Let's consider locks of hair preserved in books or jewelry. Romantic, mournful, or commemorative, hair is fragile but surprisingly enduring. In Victorian Europe, hair jewelry was common. Bracelets, rings, brooches. It's a human trace, quiet and tangible. Centuries later, it carries emotion, devotion, and a strange, almost ghostly presence. Finally, scrapbooks and collections. People collected stamps, pressed flowers, tickets, sketches. Each item might seem small, trivial, or useless. Yet together, they compose a quiet narrative of one person's attention, interest, and life. These objects survive because someone paused to care, to save, and in doing so, preserved a tiny fragment of humanity for future eyes. We're entering the quieter, more ceremonial corners of history. Objects here are often elaborate, symbolic, or painstakingly crafted, and they carry stories that are subtle, emotional, and sometimes a little mysterious. Let's begin with ritual masks from Africa. Masks were, and still are, used in dances, ceremonies, and spiritual events. Some represented ancestors, others animals, or abstract forces. Carved from wood, painted, sometimes adorned with beads or metal. They are alive with meaning. A mask might be worn once a year, then carefully stored for decades. Some are passed down generations, some buried with the maker. They carry the weight of identity, community, and belief, more than mere decoration. From Africa to Mesoamerica, we find ceremonial obsidian knives, used in rituals rather than battles. These knives are sharp, precise, and often beautifully crafted. They were tools of ceremony, sometimes used to symbolize sacrifice or transition. Many survived because they were considered sacred. and destroying or discarding them would have been unthinkable. Even today, the knives seem quiet, dangerous, and respectful, holding echoes of rituals long forgotten now. 2 Japanese, no masks. These are carved with exquisite detail to represent ghosts, spirits, gods, or archetypal human emotions. One mask might appear joyful from one angle, sorrowful from another. No actors would wear them, moving slowly and precisely, letting the mask convey emotion instead of the face. Some masks are centuries old. They survived because they were treasured, revered, and carefully maintained. Every crease and coloration is a story of performance, belief, and artistry. Let's drift west to European medieval reliquary crosses and chalices. The cross-shaped reliquary might contain a fragment of bone, cloth, or hair. The chalice could be gilded, enameled, or embedded with gemstones. They were used in rituals, daily, weekly, or on special feast days. Care and ceremony kept them intact for hundreds of years, long after the lives of those who used them faded. Even small scratches or discolorations tell stories of hands that held them, prayers whispered over them, or candles burning nearby. In Oceania, there are ritual staffs and carved figures, wooden carvings, sometimes painted with natural dyes, sometimes studded with shells or teeth. They were tools of ritual, teaching, or storytelling. Even if the precise meaning is lost to time, the craftsmanship survives, and the weight of belief lingers in every groove. These objects remind us that ritual is as much about the tactile experience as the symbolic meaning. Don't now. A quieter artifact, incense burners from the Middle East and Asia, often made of bronze, silver, or ceramics. They were used in domestic or religious rituals. Delicate perforations allowed smoke to rise, carrying fragrance and, symbolically, prayers. Some have survived centuries of use, corrosion, and relocation. When you hold one today, you can almost imagine the smoke curling through candlelight, the soft murmurs of ritual. History, in this case, is literally scented, moving to ceremonial musical instruments. Drums, flutes, bells, and stringed instruments were often used in sacred rites. The sound was part of the ritual, calling spirits, marking seasons, or guiding dance. Some instruments are fragile, some extraordinarily ornate, yet many survived because they were considered essential to continuity and memory. The act of playing an instrument in ritual gave it life. Preservation afterward kept that life echoing, from instruments to ceremonial clothing, priestly robes, festival costumes, or ceremonial headdresses were often heavily embroidered, painted, or adorned. They were used sparingly, sometimes for a single annual event. Yet their survival allows us to glimpse ceremonial life across centuries. A headdress might have feathers from dozens of birds, beads from distant lands, and colors that no longer exist in nature. It's an object that communicates identity, status, and the sacred, without a single word. And let's pause for ritual vessels from China, like bronze censers and ritual wine cups, used in ancestor worship. Temple rites, or official ceremonies, they were often inscribed with symbols or patterns. Some contained offerings, some were ceremonial in purpose only. They survived because they were treated as conduits between the human and divine, objects too important to discard. Even centuries later, you can sense the reverence imbued in their careful crafting and preservation. Finally, ceremonial weapons, not battlefield tools, but swords, spears, or axes used in ritual contexts. They might be elaborately engraved, gilded, or studded with jewels. Some marked rites of passage, coronations, or sacred oaths. The survival of these weapons is a testament to the human desire to preserve meaning, even when the purpose is symbolic rather than practical. We'll slow down even further, letting our attention linger on ordinary objects that became extraordinary over time. The quiet persistence of human touch, care. An accident often turns mundane things into history. Let's start with ancient pottery. A clay bowl from 2,000 years ago may look plain, yet it carries fingerprints, traces of meals, tiny chips from daily use. It survived fire, flood, and neglect. In its cracks, we sense the slow rhythm of everyday life. A family gathering around a table, hands scooping food, conversation flowing softly. Its survival is accidental, yet profound. It tells us more about ordinary existence than any grand monument ever could. Next, coins. Coins were everyday objects, passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket. Some survive in perfect condition, others worn smooth by centuries of use. A Roman denarius, for example, might bear the face of an emperor who spent his days unaware that tiny hands across the empire were exchanging his image for bread, wine, or tools. Over time, coins become historical artifacts, not because they were preserved intentionally, but because they endured, and each one tells a quiet story of economy, society, and human movement. Let's drift to tools and utensils. A simple bronze sickle, a carved wooden spoon, a pair of iron tongs, all designed for everyday function. Most would have been discarded, melted down, or rotted away. Some survived, sometimes by accident, sometimes by careful human preservation. The beauty here is subtle. A wooden handle worn smooth by fingers, a blade nicked and repaired multiple times. History is tactile in these cases, showing repeated human use, care, and ingenuity. Now, clothing fragments. A single glove, a torn sleeve, a patch from a quilt. These are fragments of human life. They survived in tombs, attics, or collections. Each tells an intimate story. A hand that once wore the glove, a child that tugged at the sleeve, a seamstress who stitched carefully. Perhaps under candlelight, the small details matter more than grand design. They carry the weight of ordinary lives into extraordinary times, moving to writing implements, quills, styluses, ink pots. They were used every day by scholars, merchants, and clerks. Some survive centuries later, corroded, dried, or cracked. Holding one of these objects connects us physically to someone who lived and worked hundreds of years ago. Even something as mundane as an ink stain on a quill can carry centuries of human presence. Let's consider everyday household objects turned historical. Cooking pots, combs, brushes, candles, objects often overlooked in their own time. Some survive because they were buried, lost, or preserved in archaeological sites. Centuries later, we admire them for craftsmanship, decoration, or simple evidence of human daily life. Ordinary survival transforms ordinary objects into extraordinary historical witnesses. Now, books and manuscripts, many were everyday items for their owners, not meant to last centuries. But through careful handling, chance survival, or intentional preservation, they became relics. The edges frayed, the ink faded, notes scribbled in margins. These books don't just tell stories. They carry people across time. Every worn page is a whisper of someone who read, handled, and valued it. Let's float to musical instruments once again, but this time everyday rather than ceremonial. A lute, a flute, or a simple drum used by a household or traveling musician. Some survived by luck, tucked away in attics or passed down in families. When played, they can literally bridge centuries, allowing modern listeners to hear echoes of long-gone melodies. It's history you can touch, see and hear, mundane in their time, extraordinary in ours. Finally, ordinary jewelry. Rings, brooches, pendants, sometimes given as gifts, sometimes worn daily. Some survive buried in the earth, others kept carefully in boxes. A simple silver ring may seem trivial, yet it connects us to someone's life, their choices, and their affections. Ordinary objects become extraordinary by the mere virtue of survival and the stories they carry. The quiet magic here is subtle. History isn't only in wars, kings, or grand monuments. It's in the small, human things that outlast us. Objects we might discard or overlook become artifacts simply because they persist, whispering lives, choices, and emotions across centuries. Tonight, we'll slow down even further, letting our minds wander among the objects we've explored over the past hours. We'll linger on the subtle threads that connect human life, imagination, and history through artifacts. Let's begin with the emotional weight of objects. Objects, even ordinary ones, carry traces of human touch, intention, and feeling. A worn glove, a carved toy, a simple bowl. Each of these things witnessed life in ways grand monuments never could. Sometimes an artifact survives because someone cared, sometimes by accident. Yet in every case, survival transforms the object. A bowl isn't just clay anymore. It's a witness to meals, conversations, and laughter. A toy isn't just wood. It's a vessel of imagination, play, and childhood. Objects are slow storytellers. They don't shout or demand attention. They whisper, allowing us to imagine what once was. Now, the mystical resonance. We've seen objects believed to carry curses, luck, or divine protection. Diamonds, masks, ritual knives, amulets. Some were functional, others symbolic, yet all survived because people believed in them. Belief itself preserves history. The more we imbue an object with meaning, the longer it endures, not physically alone, but culturally. Even centuries later, we feel that weight. The Hope Diamond, the terracotta warriors, no masks. They carry centuries of human imagination, care, and superstition. We might smile, shrug, or doubt their power, yet we cannot fully ignore it. Let's pause for intimate human stories, letters, diaries, hair, jewelry, personal mementos. They survive because someone valued them. They are fragments of lives, quiet, fleeting, deeply human. Reading them is like leaning close to someone long gone and hearing a faint whisper. Artifacts like these remind us that history is not just grand events. It's relationships, thoughts, hopes, grief, and joy. It's ordinary life preserved in extraordinary ways now. A reflection on ritual and ceremonial objects. Masks, staffs, instruments, ceremonial clothing. They survived because they were sacred, symbolic, or essential to culture. Even if the original meaning is lost, the object carries traces of reverence, care, and artistry. Touch them today, and you can almost feel the slow motions of ritual. the rhythm of chance, or the weight of devotion. Objects become bridges between human experience and time itself. And finally, the quiet endurance of everyday artifacts, pottery, coins, tools, clothing, books, jewelry, objects meant for daily use. Many should have disappeared, yet they linger. Each surviving artifact is a small miracle, accidental, unplanned, yet enduring. These items remind us that history is slow and quiet. It isn't always loud, dramatic, or spectacular. It's ordinary lives carried forward in fragile, beautiful, and sometimes mysterious objects. As we drift toward the close of this long journey, consider this: artifacts are more than objects. They are stories, emotions, beliefs, and traces of human existence. They endure because of care, because of chance, because of meaning we attach, and in their quiet, enduring presence, they let us touch the past, softly, gently, and profoundly. So, when you next visit a museum or see an old object in a collection, pause. Feel the subtle resonance. Imagine the hands that made it, the lives it touched, the centuries it survived. Because history isn't only written in books or carved in stone. Sometimes it lives in a small, fragile, extraordinary object, and in that way, it whispers across time, directly into the present. And that brings us gently to the end of the hidden stories behind ancient artifacts. Thank you for letting me guide you through centuries of objects, stories, and quiet human traces. Now, dim the lights, let your mind wander through these whispers of history, and drift slowly into sleep.